Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging hour discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Tom K. Wilson, provides you with insight and guidance from his years of experience as a successful real estate entrepreneur on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate, and much, much more. Now, here's your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
Welcome, and thanks for coming back and being with us. Thanks for tuning in to our Real Estate Radio Live program, your number one source for all of your real estate needs and education. We're broadcasting from the number one business radio station in the San Francisco Bay Area, KDOW AM 1220, the Wall Street Business Network. I'm Tom K. Wilson, your host for the 2 p.m. Wednesday edition of Real Estate Radio Live that comes to you daily, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m., along with 2 o'clock on Wednesdays and Fridays, along with my co-host, Joe Torre. If you can't make the live show, you can catch our podcast on RERadiolive.com, and you can catch my programs on TomWilsonProperties.com, or on iTunes, or on YouTube. If you go to TomWilsonProperties.com, you can sign up for a weekly newsletter. It gives you updates on economics as it relates to real estate, various events that are going on, both our own and others in the Bay Area. We like spreading the wealth and giving you as much access to education as you can. If you go to our website, there's a lot of educational information there. Look at some of the PowerPoints that give you a lot of data. Since I'm a techie, I love data, I love graphs, and the PowerPoints and information on the website give you lots of information on how trends are going, how different cities are doing relative to other cities. We have a couple of, if you're listening to this live or before July 9, we have 2 events coming up on commercial and multifam and syndications. A presentation at the SJREI July meeting at 7 o'clock on July 9, and also that following Saturday on July 11, all day long workshop with at the Domain Hotel. You can go to TomWilsonProperties.com to sign up for it, or you can go to sjrei.org to sign up for those events. We have Steve Fithian, a 30-year investor, and in commercial and multifam properties coming out, who will share his information. He's also CPA, so he knows how to do the due diligence financially. Be excellent content if you would like to know more about that and know how you can be part owner of a retail center or industrial or multifam property for as little as $50,000 per share. So let us know if you'd like more information about that. Today we have with us on the program Joe Torre, who's been doing marketing consulting and marketing work for Wilson Investment Properties for some time now. And Joe's a 10-year investor. He's an MBA from Columbia University. He was a past president of the Cisco REI, and he's got a marketing background. And we have been had lots of clients begging us for more and more product. They love Texas and they love Dallas, as I still do, but it's so hard to get product. There's so many people who have figured that out, and there's just only so much available. We do not want to reduce our standards. We're still looking for the better quality products, and we love Texas in general. I've always said if Dallas didn't exist, I'd be investing in San Antonio and Houston. Austin, if it weren't so expensive, but it's generally too expensive to cash flow. And so we decided to take a little closer look at that. And Joe has just come back last night from San Antonio to check it out more closely. You can do a lot of desk work, but it's nothing like having feet on the ground and talk to people and seeing product. So we got Joe on today. Joe, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
So that was, you spent several days down there, and you've done a lot of the market research for us in the last few months there to take a look at take a look at the product, and we're going to go through products down there in San Antonio. And we're going to go through that in a moment. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your real estate background, Joe.
Okay, Tom. Well, my journey with real estate began about the time of the dot-com crash about 15 years ago. Two things happened. One, a lot of my savings were wiped out because I had them in internet stocks. And the second thing was I had a lot of turbulence in my career because I worked for 3 internet companies in 4 years that went belly up, one after another. So it was just getting downsized. One of them was housed in a building not too far from where I live, and I passed by the building all the time. And I noticed that all the companies that used to work there, that used to be there, are no longer there. But the building, the tangible real estate, is still there, and it's still making money for its owners. And so I had an epiphany of sorts that instead of investing in high-flying, sexy internet stocks, maybe good old-fashioned real estate was the way to go. And so I started doing that. I started attending the San Jose Real Estate Investor Club and going to meetings and started investing. Now I own a bunch of single-family homes and some syndications.
And that's where Joe and I met at the San Jose Real Estate Investment Club. And then Joe got so involved in that he decided to start a REIA of his own, right, Joe? So.
Yes, I started one at Cisco Systems and ran it. Had 300 members on the internal email alias and had monthly meetings with outside speakers, and it was a very good program. Good perk for the engineers at Cisco.
Yeah, and Joe invited me to come talk to that group, which I did, and that was one of my first presentations to real estate investors about our real estate business that we had. So we've known each other ever since. I've always believed that unless you're a 800-pound gorilla like an Apple or a Google, most of us that don't have huge market shares, which almost no investor does. Not even hedge funds have a controlling market share, even though they might have some influence. But anytime you share information and help educate each other, it's a win-win for everybody. So Joe, shall we chat some about San Antonio now? So let's. So you went down, you lined up some meetings ahead of time, and took a tour and so forth. So talk to us about your trip.
Okay, well, overall, I was very impressed with the market there. I took an investor tour with a local REIA down there. I met with REO agents and wholesalers and property management companies. And I think San Antonio is a very good market for investors and worth considering, worth a look. It has a very diverse economy. It is heavily weighted a little bit towards the military. There's a lot of Air Force bases and Army bases there, but it's very stable.
And so what do you think about that element? Do you think that's more an advantage or disadvantage? Because I see it offering an element of stability, maybe not driving growth quite as much as maybe as a Dallas, but maybe also gives some stability. Would you?
Yes, it's definitely very stable. It's not like units that are moving in and out in Afghanistan or anything. They go there and they stay there. There's a huge medical complex for soldiers. It's the burn unit for the entire military, so everybody who had burn injuries goes there and stays there. There's like 80,000 jobs related to the military bases around there, and they're all very stable. Lackland Air Force Base, Fort Sam Houston, Randolph Air Force Base, and others.
Now, some might say, oh, geez, I'm from South Carolina, and boy, they are Georgia, and I remember a number of years ago where the base closed, and it had really made for a tough economic time on the town. How stable do you think that is? What are the politics you think revolving around the military?
Well, they did something.
Folks.
They did something very smart. Instead of having 4 or 5 different bases, they all consolidate it and consider it as one base. So for the BRAC, the Base Realignment and Closing Commission, it would be very hard for them to close all of them all at once. So they've kind of insured themselves against that happening.
Mm-hmm. And I would think the Texas politics would be such that it probably has a pretty strong lobby.
Very strong lobby, and also you have a Republican Congress, and closing bases in Texas is kind of unlikely. The other good thing about the military presence is there that they make very good tenants. They're going to be stationed there for 4 years.
Yeah.
And they don't want to buy a house, and so they rent. And if you have any issues, when you fill out, our property management contact there says that he requires them to put down the name of their commanding officer when they fill out the lease application. So if there's any problem with rent, the commanding officer gets a call, and there's no problem with rent anymore.
Interesting. Now we always say that one of the things we like about commercial retail and kinds of products versus multifamily or houses is that the tenants usually have a better credit rating, but
Right.
In this case, it's we could have a fun conversation about about the credit rating of the ultimate tenant there, the U.S. government. Huh?
Right. And the economy is very diverse. There's a lot of tourism. 26 million people go there every year to see the Alamo and tour the Riverwalk. There's technology there, rack space, a lot of healthcare, big medical centers, banking, insurance. USAA is headquartered there. There's manufacturing. Toyota has a big truck factory there, Caterpillar. So it's a very diverse economy, which makes it the whole economy stable. Plus, there's a lot of retirees there, military retirees, and they get their paycheck whether the economy's good or bad or whether interest rates are high or low.
I like that part.
Yeah, so it has a very stabilizing effect on the economy.
As long as we can print money, right, we're good.
Right. So it's a good-sized city, 1.3 million people, about 2 million overall. But it's also very livable and very accessible. You can drive from one end of the city to the other because they have a very good network of freeways. You don't see the kind of congestion that you see in other large cities.
And it's about what population?
1.3 million for the city proper and about 2 million for the metro region.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And what's good for investors is that 1% rent ratios are findable if you know where to look.
Okay. What about? I think everybody who's thinking about continuing or starting in Texas is a little worried about the oil prices, and San Antonio certainly has an element of energy in the economy. Is that do you consider that to be a plus or a minus for San Antonio?
For San Antonio, it's not a really big issue. Valero Energy is there, and they have 3,700 jobs, but they're mostly office-type jobs. The actual drilling and exploration is done outside of San Antonio, about 100 miles southeast. There's a shale oil place there. So it's not a real big issue for San Antonio as it might be for Houston.
Mm-hmm. And what's the status of that in the south there? If they're already working on it, so it's not like there's going to be a whole lot of jobs that are going to be affected by that. It's
right.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. We'll continue with more information about San Antonio and how it kind of looks in comparison to Dallas and Houston when we come back. So we've got Joe Torre with us, a 10-year investor and marketing person who's just come back from San Antonio. We're talking about Texas and how the economy looks there and how investment looks for everybody. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment and I'll give you some more information about his trip.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K.
Thanks for staying with us. We have Joe Torre in the studio today, who just got back from San Antonio and giving us his look and feel with boots on the ground of what he thinks of it from an investment standpoint. And we just reviewed economically how it's doing. It seems to be a pretty diverse economy, has a military sector which for the economy, which is very adds some stability to it. And so tell us now, Joe, what you thought about different parts of the city.
Okay, as far as investors are concerned, the best places to invest that I found were between the two beltways. So if you can visualize like a bullseye with downtown San Antonio being the center of the bullseye and two concentric circles around that, The first concentric circle is a beltway called 410, which is an interstate highway that surrounds the city. And then outside of that, further out, is a state highway called 1604. So basically, the closer you are to downtown, the older the houses are. I mean, the Alamo was built probably in the 1700s, going back that far, and then expanding outward from there. So inside 410, the houses are kind of old and will require a lot of repair. And outside of 1604, the larger circle, houses are brand new and very expensive. But in between the two is a sweet spot, particularly on the north side, where houses and rents are in line with what investors need for them to cash flow.
Are the demographics also lower inside that inner loop?
Yes, especially on the southern end of the city. One guy I spoke to said that when he's down there, he thinks like he's in Mexico, because there's a lot of people with push carts with food vendors, and there's a lot of signs written in Spanish. It's very charming and all, but it's
lots of local color, huh?
Yeah. But the north end of the city, if you can imagine, like a bullseye, from 9 o'clock to about 3 o'clock is where the sweet spot is for investors.
Mm-hmm. How interesting that, I think that's not untypical of other cities. Certainly Dallas has some similarities to that, and Houston, I think, has some similarities to that. In Dallas, that we know extremely well, we essentially buy nothing inside the LBJ and the 820, which are the inner loops that go around each of those cities. And again, you get there's some pockets where it just doesn't cash flow, but just outside those inner loops are often where those first level suburbs are, where are kind of the sweet spot for us investors.
Right. So if around the 9 o'clock area on this target, if you can visualize it, there's one section there where there's SeaWorld, which is a huge aquatic park, which is open almost year-round. And then on the other end, closer to 410, is Lackland Air Force Base and Port San Antonio. Mm-hmm. So any properties you own in between those two major employment centers is a very good place to own property. The rents go for about $1,200 to $1,400 a month, and the property values are about 100 times that. Further north, around 11 o'clock, you have the University of Texas at San Antonio, right out at the 1604 Beltway. And then inside, just outside of the 410 Beltway, is the South Texas Medical Center, which is a huge medical complex of multiple hospitals and clinics. And so again, anytime you can have property in between those two major employment centers, you have a lot of potential renters. So all over the city, between those two beltways, you have a lot of opportunity and a lot of product that's at the right price and that can rent for the right amount.
Do you find that these neighborhoods that you found that you like, or they tend to be fairly homogeneous within them, cookie cutter tracts, or are they quite mixed?
Yeah, pretty homogeneous.
Okay, and that's and I'm sure within the inner city that's not the case, but in the areas that are sweet spots for us investors, that's a characteristic.
Yeah, most of those homes that in the areas I just described were built in the 80s or 90s.
Okay, and are they mostly brick?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And certainly in Dallas, most of what we buy is almost all that we buy is brick, and so that's the case there as well. Most of what would be of interest to us is brick products.
Correct.
Okay, so we're going to get more information on investing in San Antonio when we come back with Joe Torre. Remember, we've got two events coming up in July. If you're listening this in July, this 2015, for July 9 and July 11, both a presentation at the SJREI July event and also a workshop, all-day workshop on Saturday about commercial, multifam investing and syndications, where you can learn how for $50,000 you can be an owner of an institutional grade product. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a little bit to talk to you more about what Joe's learned in San Antonio.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
So our program today, we're looking into and sharing with you what we've learned about San Antonio. Now, we watch this city and many others across the country all the time, but we're drilling down to the next level. Sent Joe Torre down for boots on the ground. And what else can you tell us, Joe, about what you learned about investing in San Antonio?
Yeah, well, this is one of the things I really enjoy about real estate investing is to see how the different markets behave. Each market has things that tenants and property owners want to see in a property. Like in Kansas City, everybody wants a house with a basement because they have tornadoes and they have to rush down to the basement. So if you have a house and you know that ahead of time, you can buy property with a basement, you can rent it easier and you could sell it easier.
And these are the kinds of things that aren't intuitive. You got to learn them about each city, right?
Right, exactly. So I always look out for that when I visit a new city. So what I found in San Antonio, there's three things. One is a preference for single-story homes. Because, like I said, there was a lot of retirement population there. So a single-story home is preferable to a two-story because once you're past 50, you don't want to climb up and down stairs every day, especially if you've had some kind of injury in Iraq or Afghanistan or someplace. So having a single-story home is a preferable thing to have. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that you should never buy a two-story house. If you get a good deal, there will be a family with little kids that will want that two-story house. But other thing, well, if you have two properties you're evaluating, one's single story and one's two story, you might want to lean to the single story.
For higher end homes, maybe there's a market for elevators, huh?
Maybe. Another thing I noticed, this is really odd, is garage doors. Some of the older properties built in the 80s, they have a two-car garage, but instead of one big garage door, they have two little ones. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of odd because now you have two garage door openers you have to deal with. So you're probably, as an investor, going to have twice as many calls about garage door openers not working. Mm-hmm. So in any market, you wouldn't want to have necessarily that. That wouldn't be preferable. But in Texas, I noticed it was even more problematic. Because a lot of Texans drive these gigantic pickup trucks with big fat tires, and then trying to get that into that one single garage door. It sounds silly, but it's like threading the needle every morning when you go to work and threading the needle when you come home. So they really
that coming home could be the problem at night, huh? Yeah. after they've stopped at the bar, huh?
Right. So having a two-car garage with one big door is preferable to having two smaller doors. So again, it's not necessarily a deal breaker. It's just something to consider when you're looking at properties to evaluate. Mm-hmm. Okay. Finally, what really helps is to have a shaded backyard because Texans like to barbecue, and it gets really, really hot in the summertime. So if you have most of the properties I saw had really large lots, some as big as a quarter of an acre. So you want to have trees back there, or you want to have it facing east so that when the sun sets in the west, the backyard is in the shade, and they can entertain and have their barbecues. That's a major selling point there. So all these things kind of make sense once you hear it, but it's not something that I, as a Californian, would have thought of. But when you go there and talk to property managers, you get a sense of what people want and what they're looking for. And I always recommend to investors that whenever you enter a new market, talk to your property management company first. Say, Mr. Property Manager, I want to make your job easier. I don't want to buy a property you're going to have to show for 3 months to get it rented. I want something that'll fly off the shelf. What should I look for? What kind of features and amenities are in demand here? And they'll tell you. They'll tell you what school districts and what areas and what kind of things to look for. And once you've spoken to your property manager, then you can go shopping because now you know what to look for.
Indeed, that's what we do at Wilson Investment Properties. We always talk to our property managers on a regular basis about if there are any changes, because what we want to do is start with, just as Joe said, the area that's best for rental properties, which is best for investors, and then pick houses within that, not the other way around, buy anything and hope that it fits. Very interesting input. Each area certainly has its own uniquenesses, and that was interesting, Joe. So we'll be back in a moment with some more information about San Antonio and Texas.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
Welcome back. We're enjoying learning from Joe Torre, who is just down at San Antonio looking for other markets for our clients. So Joe, after having been there and in Dallas, you've been in Houston in the past, Austin, what did you come away with any thoughts or about how San Antonio looks as compared to Houston and Dallas?
Well, I kind of prefer San Antonio over Houston. Not that there's anything wrong with Houston. Houston is a gigantic market, and it's got a very diverse economy, somewhat heavily dependent on oil. But what I learned while I was down here that the oil industry it's not as problematic for Houston as you might think. So the gas prices are down, so that means oil industry profits might be down because they're not making as much per barrel of oil as they used to. But the employment numbers...
And maybe don't need quite as many folks to drill for new oil.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, but the employment isn't that affected by it because when oil prices go down, as you might expect, the demand for oil goes up because people take more vacations, they drive cross-country, they take flights around the country on vacation. And so when demand goes up, the oil industry, they actually increase the number of people who are working on refining and production, which is what Houston mostly is. So there's a decline in the number of people on drilling and exploration. They might close down some wells in the Gulf of Mexico because they're too expensive to operate. But that's counterbalanced by the increase in the number of people working on the refining side. So it kind of balances out, and there's not that much of a hit to the local economy when oil prices drop the way they have. So I was surprised to find that out, but it kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I've been saying for some time from the things that I've been reading about Dallas that Dallas certainly is does not have as large a energy sector as Houston does, but it has some. But what I've been reading and has been pointed out is that even though that sector might be down, there are others that are that benefit from having lower priced fuel, such as airline industry and distribution, transportation, things like that. So it's mitigating factors.
Yes, absolutely. So the Houston economy is very diverse. They've got a large market. They've got all kinds of industries down there. So that's a very good place to invest. I personally just don't care for the city as much as I do San Antonio. San Antonio is very livable. For a city its size, it's really easy to get around. None of the realtors I worked with even considered traffic. They said, let's go here, let's go there. It was just, they have such a good system of beltways and interstates going through the city. You can get from anywhere to anywhere pretty much without having to worry about traffic.
Yeah, I'd certainly have to say in Dallas that although it's maybe not quite as bad as San Francisco Bay Area, certainly LA, during commute time, it does. There are areas that really jam up, but you don't see that as much in San Antonio.
Right. And San Antonio doesn't have some of the issues with weather that Houston has because Houston's right on the coast, so they have hurricanes, and they have a lot of bad weather, flooding sometimes. So you have less of that or none of that up in San Antonio. For people interested in Houston, I would say try to invest north of I-10 because I-10 is a east-west freeway that basically cuts Houston in half. Mm-hmm. And if you stay north of I-10, you have a lot less issues with hurricanes and weather. In fact, if you want to check that, you can call your insurance agent and ask for a quote for a typical sized house. What does it cost for hurricane insurance in a location north of I-10 versus south of I-10? And it's like double.
Wow.
So you can see it's a very pronounced difference. So that's a good way to play Houston.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Whereas sounded like San Antonio maybe is more like is more like maybe the north side of Houston, huh? As far as insurance goes, but maybe even better.
Better because it's so far away from the coast.
And we'll certainly be analyzing those kinds of details more and getting that kind of information to you. Did you come across how taxes are there in San Antonio? As I recall, they're pretty similar throughout the state. Austin is higher. I know Austin is up probably 0.5% higher than Dallas.
Yeah, taxes were about the same as the rest of Texas, maybe 2.5%, that range.
Something like that.
Yep.
Which sometimes isn't quite as bad as people think, because often it, at least in a climbing economy, because often it lags a little bit.
But the largest component of that is for schools, and you want good schools because it helps property values and make the areas desirable. So,
Okay. What you have next there, Joe?
that's
Okay. So now the San Antonio. Let's ask you what else you learned about it from the folks you toured with. Your tour was what, a whole day tour?
it was about an 8-hour tour. We drove around different parts of the city, mostly in the northwestern section. Like I said, in between the two beltways. We looked at properties in different states. Some of them were just taken over, and they were really gutted. Everything was torn out, and they were just going to rebuild it. There was a hoarder in there before, and they had to get rid of all the junk. You wouldn't believe that you can get 6 bins full of trash out of a small house like that, but they did somehow. And then others that were just refurbished and look really nice. And the investors were mostly single investors. Some of them were beginners, some of them were more experienced. And the guy who ran it was an attorney, a real estate attorney, and he was giving his take on how to evaluate properties and how to look at deals and find deals.
And how many houses did you get to see about?
Well, from the inside, about 8, and then we drove by a bunch. We said, this is a house that I bought 2 years ago and refurbished, and now he gave us the numbers, and so we probably saw about maybe twice that many overall.
And you see some both on the inner. Did you go inside the that loop as well?
Inside 410, no. We stayed pretty much between
So
410.
So they were already focused for you. They'd already selected the areas that were better for investors.
Right.
Okay. And it's and so were most of them 3 and 4 bedroom properties?
Yes, 3 and 4 bedrooms, mostly single story. Built in the 80s.
And were there a lot of 2 stories around? Just these, the ones who were doing the tour had already kind of filtered them down to the...
Yes. There are 2 stories everywhere, but he tends to prefer single stories.
Okay. All right. So we're talking about San Antonio today and how that stacks up against the other properties, or other cities, I should say. We got Joe Torre here, who just did some touring. And we'll be back in a moment to give a little summary and tell you how you can find more information about San Antonio. So stay with us.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
Well, great. We got a little bit of a virtual boots on the ground tour of San Antonio. Joe, can you wrap up for us what the key points that you learned about San Antonio for an investor?
Sure. Well, so overall, I just think it's interesting and it's worth considering as a investment opportunity. It's a great market. It's a good-sized city, 1.3 million people. It's got good population growth, 16% between 2000 and 2010. So those people are going to need housing. It has a very diverse economy, a very stable economy, and it's a very livable and enjoyable city. The Riverwalk is beautiful. There's tons of restaurants, places, things to do, SeaWorld, and other attractions.
I was surprised how many visitors they get.
Yeah,
tourists.
26 million a year.
Yeah, may not be Orlando, but that's pretty good.
Yeah. So, and there's a good opportunity, at least for the time being, between the 2 beltways that we discussed, between 410 and 1604 on the north end of the city. So it's a good place to consider investing as long as you know what to look for. And you can find out more information by going to TomWilsonProperties.com or give us a call
at 408-867-1867, 408-867-1867, or TomWilsonProperties.com, and get more information about San Antonio. We're going to have the information put together for you, and you can go to our website and pull up a summary of the information that Joe has learned from going down there and touring properties and talking to lots of different folks. So we, at this point, it looks like we're probably going to scale Wilson Investment Properties into San Antonio and provide product for you there. So we're working on that. And if you want to know some more information in the meantime, certainly let us know about that. We maybe as one more point, can you summarize for them the economy? What's driving what are the main employers there in San Antonio?
Well, the main employers are the military, mostly Air Force and Army, that have 80,000 jobs at Lackland Air Force Base and Fort Sam Houston and Randolph Air Force Base. But there's also a lot of healthcare at the big medical center I mentioned earlier. There's banking, Toyota is there, Caterpillar, some aerospace, Boeing. Because of the Air Force presence, there's a huge Boeing presence also. That's where Air Force One and other big Boeing planes are taken care of.
Okay, good. So thank you, Joe, for being with us. That was a great input. Nice tour you had. And remember, if you're interested also in commercial or multifam and syndications, that we have a couple of big events coming up in July. And we have a guest speaker coming in from Dallas, who's not going to talk just about Dallas and Texas. He's going to be talking about the investing in those areas and in that kind of product. July 9 at sjrei.org for a presentation for the evening, and then there's a all-day workshop on July 11 at the Domain Hotel, again sponsored by sjrei.org, or you can go to tomwilsonproperties.com to get more information about those, and also you can sign up for our weekly newsletter that gives economic updates in regards to real estate, and a lot of educational information. So thanks for being with us today. Joe, thank you for being on the program, and that we learned a lot about San Antonio. Remember, the only thing that matters is what you do next. Come back with us next week.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Tune in, log in, download our podcast, discover more at RERadiolive.com. RERadiolive.com.